Hello, everyone. It is a Tuesday, and we're here with a very special guest, Tracy Quinlan. We've never had Tracy on the show before. You're probably wondering why I'm wearing a skeleton upon a skeleton, and I'm doing the Scorpio version of what Tracy is here for, which she's an AcuTonics healer, so she's like a healer, and so I thought I'd wear my like skeleton, like what are you doing with the body or the human or whatever. So that's my Scorpio version of what you're here for.
I
Um,
like it.
so wait, so you're an acutonics practitioner? What exactly is acutonics?
Mm. How long do we have?
Oh, well, we have an hour.
So, acutonics is a healing modality that combines acupuncture or traditional Chinese medicine, um, astrological mythology, and archetypes. And I'm missing something. There's something really important. Oh, and music, right? The sound part of it. So, what it does is you're combining sounds, right? So the interval has some healing within it. The points that you're using or the places that you're putting the sound, whether that's in the field or on the body, has some healing properties to it. And then each frequency, as we know, right? If it's connected to a planet or something else, has its own healing properties. And so you're trying to sort of manage all of that within one modality.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Okay, so there's sounds involved, there's places in the body, and then there's fields. Okay, so wait, so does this stem back to Pythagoras or like the because wasn't he a musician but also like an astrologer and a healer? He's probably I don't know.
I'm sure. I mean, the women who developed it were they came from healing backgrounds, and originally, if I remember correctly, it was any if you're getting needles done, not everybody loves needles, and so I think it was Donna. I should get her name right. So Donna Carey, Marjorie de Munk, and Ellen Franklin are the three who developed it. And Donna was an acupuncturist and a massage therapist. And I don't know Marjorie's background, but the two of them are the ones that sort of started working with like Om frequency and all the sound frequencies and mixing that with traditional Chinese medicine. And then Ellen Franklin came along, and also she has a psych background and is attached to Jung. And so I think that's part of where the astrology came into it, where those archetypes. And she also had a business background. And so they came together, and you're going to have to get me back on track because Neptune across from my Mercury is going to take us all over the
Oh my God, we're
lands.
gonna get a pictorial sweep of something here. I'm excited for that. I love Neptune. Okay.
And so, yeah, originally, I think the idea was to create something that was a little bit fuller than just traditional Chinese medicine, that was a bit more Western and was, it's very gentle. So it could be used on anybody. It's not as, it's not a Mars thing with needles, right? It's more of a Neptunian or an energetic or a sound, right? Type
So
of modality.
okay, let's take there's like a lung point right here in the front of the shoulder. That's like I don't know,
Lung
there
one.
it's
Yeah.
on the ears or whatever. So what you would where an acupuncturist would needle this point, you would instead put an acutonics thing on it.
Take a tuning fork
Okay.
and you strike it. Usually have a striker, and you'd find lung one and you'd put the fork on the point,
Interesting.
right? So you could, and then whichever forks you choose is just going to depend on what you're trying to do on the point,
Okay.
right?
So
So yeah,
so the meridians travel up and down the body through these points and there's I mean we could say there's chi in the meridians or there's frequencies or what have you. So putting a frequency on this meridian would send it would break up the chi along if you had a blockage or something like that. Could you theoretically break up blocked chi with a tuning fork?
yeah. So certain combinations, like a second, is quite like a pushing type of an interval because intervals are a really big part of this. You're always using two forks and creating some kind of a musical interval, and each interval does something different. And so, if you were trying to move a blockage, then you would want to likely use something that had either some opening, which is a third, or you would use something that makes a second, which is more of like a pushing. And if there's some kind of a major blockage, you would want to use that kind of an interval to move the energy. Yeah.
Interesting. So then if you move the energy with this, how long does the movement last? Like if okay.
I mean, I've had situations where one treatment was enough to do the thing the person wanted. And the thing is if you can come at it from a lot of different ways. I am not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner at all. And with AcuTonics, I mean, I think in the beginning they just assumed you were coming in with that knowledge, right? But now it's more you don't have to have that knowledge, and they've picked between 40 and 50 significant acupuncture points, and they kind of want you to, if you're not a TCM practitioner, you just sort of stick within that, right? And so, you know, first of all, as you know, with any kind of remediation and healing, it really depends on where somebody's at in
Mm,
terms of how long, right? Is this something chronic that's been lifelong? And
yeah.
so often what I find, when you do the healing energetically, um, people go, what can I expect? Well, you. And so what likely will happen is things enter your consciousness, right? So you'll have insights into where this pattern is coming from. You might get introduced to another path of healing that is the thing that you need. Like it's really fascinating how it opens things up for people, and it's so different. It's
Mm,
vast. Makes it hard to market because you're
mhm.
like, I don't know what's going to happen with you. I just know it's going to help, and you're going to feel a lot better when we're done. We
Yeah.
can treat, like, I have a lot of people who come for anxiety. It's a really popular treatment, but right now I think a lot of people are anxious,
Yeah.
and so a lot of times we're just calming the nervous system down to
Mm,
just allow whatever the healing is going to be. I actually always start with grounding and calming the nervous system down, because the healing's not going to happen until those two things are there, right?
interesting. Well, okay, just to be super scientific about it and be like myself about it. Okay, so
Right.
what astrologers know that like a lot of practitioners don't know is like we can look at where the person is in their astrological transit cycle when they come into you. Like, so let's say Saturn just begins to go over their Mars and it's going to sit there for like a whole year and retrograde back, and and so they have some pain or some weird thing going on, and you do acutonics. We can't really expect it that acutonics is going to resolve something that the transit is going to exacerbate for this, year-long time. It might resolve it for a few days or move the chi, but that transit is still pushing chi on it. But let's say somebody had Mars going over their Saturn by transit, that would be like a week-long transit. So maybe the acutonics would resolve that one because you're kind of move the energy as the Mars moves through. But like you could kind of affix your acutonics under the transit cycle and say like you can expect that this is going to resolve it for a little bit, but you're in this larger transit that might re-exacerbate it for longer. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not, but
Can I address that a little
yes.
bit? So resolving is hard. How do you define resolve, right?
Okay.
So my approach, and I think you and I are on the same page with this, is that we're learning things, right? The planets are teaching things about ourselves and how to navigate the world, right?
Right.
And would you agree with that statement?
Sure. I would say humans are, well, a spiritual human especially is always learning. Like that's the path or something.
Right. And so when we have a transit, and if somebody's having a difficult time with the transit, it's probably a pretty good chance that they don't want to learn or don't want to acknowledge or don't want to do the thing that needs to happen when the transit hits.
Hmm.
It's not usually people who have a transit and then they go with the energy that are having a problem. It's usually people who are resisting the transit.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Makes
I
sense.
mean, there's lots, I mean, that's a really huge simplification, but for our purposes in an hour-long conversation, let I would go from there. So say it's like this big long transit between, let's say, Pluto and Mars, right? So one of the premises is like, so this is an ohm fork, and there are other forks like ohm that are like, they say like to bring something into right relationship, right? So ohm is kind of the anchoring fork, and then you're going to bring in whatever frequency. So what you could do in that case is you would use ohm with Mars to bring Mars into right relationship. Then you would use Pluto and um, ohm, say, right relationship, and then you bring them together.
Wow.
And so then what likely happens, either the person just becomes way more at ease with the energy, right? Because now you've integrated it in a healthy way, you've introduced it in a healthy way.
Hmm.
Hopefully, they learn how to work with the positivity that that transit or the change that that transit can bring, right?
Interesting.
If they continue to resist, you're likely not going to get a lot of help from one treatment, maybe a little bit.
Hmm.
But if somebody then goes, oh, this is what this is supposed to be. These are the changes I'm supposed to make. And they don't need to be big changes usually,
Hmm.
but the treatment can open somebody up to realize how to use the energy of the transit.
Interesting. So you could have like an epiphany from a treatment that really changes how you live out the rest of the transit. I mean, because a lot of times with remediation, we're scheduling things. We're like, okay, you're going to be the Pluto Mars transit, so you might as well schedule AcuTonics for the next like 12 months as the transit hits or whatever. But you're saying that you could have enough movement in one session to really change the trajectory of a transit, so it does. You don't necessarily have to treat for the whole duration of it, kind of thing.
No, no. I mean, I would recommend you do more in a really long transit. I'd recommend a couple of treatments, or usually three is a good place to start,
Hmm.
especially for the long ones, and especially if that planet in the chart has caused problems, the whole lifetime, right? Like this is
Yeah.
something that's a sensitive spot in the chart. It's always problematic. Mars, actually, I did bring an example, a case study chart to look at, and it was Mars that was her challenge, right? And so
Okay.
if she was to have Pluto to her Mars, because before we worked together, she hadn't integrated it,
Hmm.
um, she likely would have had something quite traumatic happen,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
Um, but because we were able to integrate the Mars through the treatments that she self-treated, actually, she had her own fork. So we just had an astrology session and I told her what to do and it sorted itself out.
I was going to
So
ask that if you could empower people to kind of treat themselves the duration of a transit,
yeah,
or
yeah,
natally, if you had a natal problem that gets exacerbated a lot, like can you
yeah.
use
Yeah,
that?
we do self-care workshops all the time to
Oh,
help people treat themselves. Yeah.
interesting. So I'm curious, how did you personally get into acutonics?
Not a short story, but it was a Neptune transit.
Okay.
And so Neptune does not aspect anything in my chart other than a wide trine to my ascendant.
Okay.
It's not an energy that's really well integrated in with my personal planets. So when it came to oppose my sun, it was life changing and very difficult.
Mm,
I mean, it was coming at me from the 12th house.
wow.
Yeah. And my intuition shifted. Like I could ask a question, um, should I do this? And like literally the billboard would answer the question exactly within 5 minutes. Like it was just always, the universe was always giving it to me. Shut down. I didn't have that anymore. I had
Really? You
zero
think a Neptune
access to
transit
that.
would make that just,
So what's interesting is that this is how I've interpreted it since, is that if you take for granted your intuition and there's more you could be doing with it, it'll get shut down during that Neptune transit.
wow.
And then you're forced to have faith and to trust and to really tap into the bigger picture of your intuition. That's my interpretation of it.
Wow. Okay.
And so I was trying to find a positive way to work with the Neptune, right? To remediate it. It was literally trying to remediate a Neptune transit. So I discovered this book actually, which is his name is Hans Cousteau. And what he did is through math, he's a musician and an astronomer and something else. And he calculated the movement of all the planets and created the sound version of that frequency. So he kind of birthed the tuning forks and sound.
Hmm.
And so I found it wasn't AcuTonics at the time, and I found a set of planetary tuning forks, and that was it. They just sat there. And it wasn't until that transit passed and I moved into a different cycle that I discovered AcuTonics. And so I now knew what to do with my forks, and I went and I started my training that way. But it was all born out of trying to remediate Neptune.
Fascinating. So you had your fork sitting around for a long time, and they would just it's like they didn't necessarily speak to you, but then when you found out about acutonics, then it really brought them alive, and you were able to use them. So then, did you integrate them with your astrology right away, or was it did you kind of learn the acutonics and then later integrate it with astrology?
Well, it's interesting because the first time I took it was with Will Morris.
Yeah, I was gonna
Will.
ask if you know him. I met him the other day and he
Yeah, he's my
talked about you.
mentor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's where I started. And actually, we were his first level 1 AcuTonics class. And if those of you watching, if you don't know who Will is, he comes from alternative healing. He's like massive background in TCM, massive background in um, naturopathy, all that. He's run colleges and programs and super smart. Um,
Isn't he on the board
but
at Kepler or something?
Yeah, he's on the
Okay.
board of Kepler now. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, he's all over. But he's yeah, super smart and comes really from like an alternative health background and astrology. He's been studying astrology forever and ever. And so it was so amazing because there are two people in that class. I went live to their beautiful place in BC and did a class. There were only two of us. She was studying acupuncture and I was an astrologer, and so we spoke to both things that Will comes from. So it was I felt sorry when he would talk to me about astrology for her, and it went the other way when he talked TCM, right, for me. But yeah, and I don't even know where we got there.
Well, I'd asked if you immediately integrated it with
No,
astrology or if you
yeah.
had to like kind of learn the acupuncture side of things or something.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out how to use the two things together because they don't always overlap nicely. We're an element short in Western astrology, right? They've got an extra element in Chinese medicine.
The ether element, right?
Yeah, the ether element. Yeah, and so therefore, like the meridians and things it's not perfect. It's not a perfect translation.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it took me a while to sort of figure out how to actually take myself and my previous learning of astrology out of it and learn the acutonics
Wow. So
and then return to the astrology.
interesting. Are you really versed in the meridians and everything like that?
No, I mean, as far as I need to know them for acupuncture, I don't feel like I'm really well versed in them, but
Huh.
compared to people who don't know anything about it, I'm pretty well versed.
Interesting.
How's
So
that?
can you do acutonics on the ear with all those little points, or is that too
You can.
microscopic?
You can. Well, so you can get gem tips for the forks for specifically the acutonics forks, and sometimes you can get feet to put like the generic that you can get on any tuning fork, and
Wow.
you can get them really small. So you could, if you were to go that route,
Wow.
get a bit more precise. I know that a lot of acupuncturists will actually do the needle and then vibrate the needle. So there's a
Fascinating.
few ways that you can work in the more minuscule like gallbladder points around the ear and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Cool. So how long have you been an astrologer, actually?
Um, so technically, I started my formal studies probably 12 years ago,
Oh,
and I
that's
started
all?
practicing about eight
Oh.
years ago. Yeah,
You seem like you've been an
yeah.
astrologer forever. Like,
I mean, I, my first time I drew my own chart, I was 15. So it's been a hobby forever, right?
okay.
And as a hairstylist for 35 years, my clients always got forced to talk about their sun sign and their moon sign. And I had like the sun sign, moon sign book on my station. And so, I mean, I was versed in the basics
Okay.
for a
Interesting.
long time. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so like now in your in your weekly, like how many acutonic sessions? I mean, if you don't do any, that's okay too. I'm just curious, like how much acutonics do you actually do?
It really is depends and it's cyclical. And I mean, I'm writing a book right now, so it's sparse, right?
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I sometimes I can do four and sometimes I can do none.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's how astrology is too. Like sometimes you'll get five in a week,
Yeah.
and then sometimes, that's just the consulting professions. Okay, so I heard through the grapevine that you can do acutonics from far away, and I'm like, what? That seems bogus. Like, what? Come on, like, how does that work?
Well, do you believe in like people doing distance Reiki treatments?
I don't know. I don't
Mm.
know. Like, because if Reiki is running chi, then how do you? I mean, I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I'm just being
No, that's fine.
okay.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I'm like you. I've got an air brain. And so the logistic side of it is like, I don't know.
Like I
But
understand
we
how you
don't,
could theoretically teach someone to do acutonics on themselves. Like I
yeah,
do that stuff all the
yeah,
time. It's like talk to the
yeah.
massage therapist and be like, "Can you get T1, whatever." But okay,
So
I'll let
one of
you.
the, I don't want to get this wrong. So one of the intervals, it's either Sedna or Nibiru that is part of the acutonic system. Um, Part of that is bridging the ethers, right? Bridging time and space. And so that can be built into the protocol if you're using those specific frequencies and to, work into the microcosm out to people that where there is no time and space, we can project ourselves on the table. Your energy body can be here and
Hmm.
we can do treatment. So, and we do them in class, like any class that we do that's on Zoom, we treat each other at a distance. It's just how we've done it from like since COVID, right? Because so much of this stuff is now on Zoom.
Fascinating.
And
Well,
I've had great benefit from a distance treatment. So, you know,
yeah, I've
who's
had
to
great
argue with that?
benefits from my brother doing Reiki on me from a distance. Like I have had benefits from distance Reiki, and I think even the intention that somebody is trying to heal you is healing. You know what I mean? And we're reading this book right now, Real Magic, which was talking about how people are basically interdimensional and how the mind spans space and time, and that's kind of what you're talking about. Is like if we're like almost interdimensional, like what we're doing here is happening over there.
Is that the book that's all about like magic and research? Like he's a research scientist.
Well, it's called Real Magic, but I don't know that he's a researcher, but yeah,
Oh, okay. Maybe we're not thinking of the same one. Anyways.
interesting. So when you teach Acutonics online, your students are all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean to take it aside, but tell us about the book you're writing. I'm like all grilling you. That's what we came here to do.
So I'm writing a book about looking at the rulerships, following the rulerships in your chart to use that to find the best place for you to find relationship and what kind of relationship to look for. So looking at the fifth, the seventh, and the eighth, are they connected to each other? Is your chart designed for you to have a stereotypical romantic partnership going into deeper, right? Or do you need to look at relationships a different way? Do you have a more complicated relationship story?
And
So
also, so okay, so you have a few specialties. You do relationship, acutonics, sounds like remedy in general.
I love
Okay.
remediation. Love it.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Okay, so all right, do you want to show us do you know Michelangelo?
I know of. I don't know
Okay.
Michelangelo personally or anything.
I think he does acutonics, does he?
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar. I think
Okay.
he used to, and he's doing his own thing, but I could be remembering that wrong. Don't quote me.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. All right, do you want to show us your slides? Because my next question is like if someone had a Mars problem, I thought we could look at Mars in a few different signs, but maybe you could show us your example chart.
Okay, hang on. Let me just go to the examples. Here we go. So we can look at her chart. Nope, that's too many. I'm just gonna leave it in regular mode, and we'll look at it that way. Um, can I share my screen?
Yes.
Yay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this client came to me. I actually met her in an AcuTonics class and she wanted a natal reading. But her biggest concern, woman in her 50s, she came for a natal reading. She wanted fork recommendations and point recommendations based on her astrological chart. And the acute problem that she was having at that moment was she came from a very long heterosexual marriage where he was controlling and maybe emotionally abusive, manipulative, but he had anger issues. Now she's in another long term relationship, this time with a woman, and is encountering the same thing with this partner. And so I didn't look at their charts, but I did bring up their data and laughed because both of them, the ex husband had sun on her Mars,
Yeah.
new partner, moon on her Mars.
Oh my gosh.
So when I described Mars and Aries to her, she was so resistant to all of the energy that I was describing. And yet she was like, they were very active, and they did things like slightly dangerous things like whitewater rafting and things that had, that Mars and Aries energy about them. She's competitive. She was in like a couple different fun leagues and competitive sports. Like, she had the Mars and Aries was there. She just didn't want to own it. She didn't want to own it in her relationship, right? It's how I interpreted it. And so, because she has this Mercury in Cancer, in mutual reception with that moon in Libra, like her energy was super Libran. So, I mean, look where the moon is, right?
Yeah.
And, and it's trying her sun. Like, yeah, the moon is just very much the energy that she gives off
She has
with
a
this,
pretty hardy T-square between Moon, Mars, and
right?
Saturn. It's pretty
Right?
burly. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. So what we did, and if she would have needed to come more, likely Saturn would have been the next thing, right? Because there were definitely some Saturnian qualities to what she was describing, especially with the ex-husband. But it sounded like in this relationship they'd gotten over that, so it was still the Mars that was the challenge. And she, I mean, she was self-employed, had a very successful business, so she was really living that Saturn consciously, whereas the Mars was happening more unconsciously, right?
Mm.
So what I did is I just suggested, and I actually got away from the more physical, planetary meridian points, and there's some more psycho emotional things or psycho spiritual also things in PCM. And so I had her work with some of those and bring Mars and Venus together, because they actually create a fifth. Their tones create a fifth, which is extremely healing. It's one of the most balancing, combinations. Sun and moon are too in terms of yin and yang, but because Mars and Venus are more equal in terms of their energetics, they're just a really great balancing. And so I just had her use, first I had her do like the right relationship with Venus and Mars to make sure she wasn't bringing in any garbage. And then just had her do a general treatment with the Venus and Mars together. And what was interesting, it wasn't just her partner. One of her best friends was Aries. Like, she had attracted all of this Aries energy into her life
Wow.
and didn't see it in herself,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's
And
so
what was interesting,
interesting. Oh, sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
Well, that's so interesting because from remediation theory, when we have Mars problems like Mars and Aries or something, you look to the opposite sign. This is one just general theory and remedy because to see what planet rules that opposite sign, and what rules Libra is Venus. And so Venus is supposed to be one remedy for Mars issues. So that's interesting that it comes up in AcuTonics as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the people who created this system have enough astrological knowledge to have sort of been able to do that on purpose, in some ways. Although it's hilarious that the two sounds create this perfect healing fifth.
Yeah.
Nobody created that. That's just the sounds that they do and how they harmonize together, right? Which is beautiful scientific proof
Yeah.
of something, right, that's been suspected for millennia
Well,
about
and
those two things.
astrology is frequencies, and I think cutting the frequencies with frequencies is a brilliant remedy. I mean, yogis do that all the time. They're trying to run the frequencies out to balance their system. Why not use these tuning forks? I mean, it's like tuning your piano or tuning, the ancients would say that the planets play your chakras like a flute. So if your flute is playing a weird note, you might just get your tuning fork out and retune it up, like I think that this is totally amazing. Now, so then would you recommend that she uses these tuning forks on transits to her Mars in Aries kind of thing?
It continued to be a challenge. Yeah, absolutely. Especially like you said, like this is quite a gnarly T square, right? So you know that anytime it's getting triggered. I'm gonna guess with the trine to Uranus, there's always an impulse to run,
Ah, interesting.
right?
Yeah, that would be true. Huh.
Escape. Yeah, I don't know that that's true, but just looking at this, I'd be like, that's where I think, like, just because that trine would just be like, what's the easy way out? I'm gonna go be by myself,
So
right?
would you then put the tuning forks on her partner too, or just her?
Um, so you wouldn't have had to in that situation because the partner was not the one having the problem at all,
Okay.
right? It was, and yeah, the partner was just being the partner. And it was really what I felt through our conversation, that her not seeing that part of herself was actually the problem.
Mm,
And as soon as she owned it, then she wouldn't project it, right?
okay.
Because what she was doing is she was projecting it on all these Aries people in her life instead of owning it.
Interesting. So, okay, so can I keep grilling you? I'm like,
Can I
that's
stop sharing?
okay, you can if you
Okay.
want. So let me,
No, we
yeah.
don't have to.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you have prescribed a different remedy if you saw Mars in Taurus?
So there's the forks also are elemental, right? So like the moon forks can be used as water forks, and there's like several earth forks. Ohm is like represents the 1 year Earth cycle. Earth day represents the 24-hour Earth cycle. Zodiac is the movement through the ecliptic or through the, the thing, the big thing that we're all moving through. And so there's different. You can work cycles too, is my point. So say that was a Mars and Taurus, and the transit was yearly, right? It was a solar problem. Well, then you would automatically you're going to use Ohm for two reasons, because it's a Mars and Taurus, and it's a yearly cycle problem that she runs into every time. So it really depends on how you're coming at it.
Hmm,
In this particular case, no. If it was Mars and Taurus and it was a different thing, Venus and Mars is still going to help, because that Mars is being ruled by Venus. So you can do that too, right? You can bring to, especially two planets that are in quincunx, um, you can bring the rulers together
hmm,
and help somebody understand the quincunx energy, right? The stuff
okay.
they can't see.
Interesting. I'm going to keep throwing these at you just to see what happens to your brain. Okay, so then what about Mars in Gemini? Would that change it? Because that's not
Well, then you just
Venusian.
bring in, you just, if I mean, Mars and Gemini is not going to be sitting across from the moon and Libra.
Right.
So, right, like, so give me the aspect that we're dealing with, not just the Mars placement.
Mars in Gemini, square Pluto in Pisces. I don't know. That's theoretical.
How
No,
about we do something a little bit more simple? How about we say square Mercury and Virgo?
mm,
How's that? Okay.
okay.
Because then you would definitely want to bring the Mars and the Mercury fork together, right? You would likely really want to work on strengthening the Mars and putting the Mercury into right relationship, because it's dominant,
Okay.
right? So if somebody's like always in their head and they don't know how to take action, right? You want to calm the Mercury down and you want to build the Mars up.
I like
Yeah.
the right relationship remedy. Like basically it's asking the tuning forks to like tune the person into the what would make this frequency express in the best form of it for you know, and that's kind of setting an intention. I mean, so much of these kinds of subtle remedies have a lot to do with the intention set by the person doing the remedy, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I always look at, I mean, our chart, if we can live it to its very best gift, right? That's sort of how I see what we can do with AcuTonics, right? Is bring all of the planets into a right relationship so that you can get the very best out of those placements.
Interesting. Well, it makes me think of Superhit. Have you ever heard of it? It's an incense flavor. Well, it's made by the same company as Nag Chamba, but Superhit is supposed to bring everything into the chart into like right relationship, essentially. Like if you burn Superhit over your chart, it's like everything's supposed to, you know. I remember years ago I was burning Superhit over Donald Trump's chart. So I'm not
Didn't
even
work.
political. Um, so, okay, cool. So I love this. Anything more about this example?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Um, so how does it now let's talk about placement. So with the Mars and Aries and the Venus and Mars tuning forks, where would you place those on the body?
So what I recommended for her is there's something called the three treasures. And so there's a point that's like if you take your hand and place this part of your hand right underneath the belly button, right underneath this is going to be something called Ren 4. And so that's the first treasure, and it's in charge of the lower body. and the lower energy field and our connection to the earth. And then this is the second treasure. So this is Ren 17. And it's right, if you imagine the perfect placement of your nipples, it's right in the middle.
Well,
And then do 20. If you go right to the very top of your head and just slightly behind it, that's going to be, so this is going to be our emotional body and this is our spiritual body. So some of the fastest ways to get frequencies into body and into all those centers is to pick those three spots.
hmm.
So if I'm trying to generally like, so I really like building up the ascendant, right? And so what I'll often do is, right relationship with the planet that's in charge of the ascendant, and then right relationship with the ruler of the ascendant if that's necessary,
Hmm.
right? So, what's your ascendant?
Gemini,
Where's Mercury? What sign is Mercury in?
Mercury and Scorpio.
Yeah, so you'd put so Gemini rising, we'd strengthen Mercury, right? But then we'd also regulate Mars and then bring them together. And so,
Because
and
Mars
then
rules my Mercury.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so you then are going to like just inject that into the three places over and over again to build up the ascendant. Or you can just build Mercury and with the intention that you're building the ascendant, you're building vitality, you're building strength, you're building all the positive things around the ascendant. And that tends to really help people's energy level big time.
Interesting. Can you overdose on AcuTonics?
You can't, I mean, so when we did level two is all about um so there are three, sometimes more, but most forks come in three sizes. And so this is called a low frequency fork. It's the big one. And one of the ways they talk about it is that it's more body, it gets deeper into the body. So if you're dealing with physical issues, then you're going to want to work with some low frequency fork. Emotional, physical emotional is the mid fork. And when you start out, you almost always just learn mid forks. And then when we're talking energetics and the fields, then we have high frequency forks.
Hmm.
Okay. And what was your question again?
Can you
I was,
overdose?
yes. So in level two, you start bringing in the levels of frequency. And so, and also like things like gongs and drums and rattles and all like the extra sound tools. It's bad. That's the most expensive course because you end up spending so much money when you're done that you're bankrupt. But, anyways, we did our level two. And one of the young women, and I only know this because she came to see me after for a reading, but she was uber Aquarius. And the second day of our course was Sunday. And our instructor brought the sun gong. And we just did sun. We did a sun prayer. We just sun. And she had to sit for an hour after we all left because she couldn't drive. She was so overstimulated. And so I didn't know that about her until after because she came to me after. I was like, well, no wonder. Like she just has all of this Aquarius and it's in the sixth. And
Okay.
it was just like, oh my God, she was just like not grounded, not she was like exhausted. It was bad. Like that was just way too much solar energy. And they actually, one of the things like the solar seventh, I don't think I have it close by. The sun fork, there is no big sun fork because they're like the sun is already huge. We don't need the big solar energy.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so it's always paired with a low ohm so that, there's some dominance over that solar energy. So it's kind of
Fascinating.
interesting.
So
Hmm.
wait, so a gong bath is essentially AcuTonics?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, the first day of my first AcuTonics class, we were sitting in their living room and the Om Gong was like, my feet were up and the Om Gong was in front of me and she hit it. And every cell in my body woke up. I'd never felt anything like that in my life. And I'm like, oh, this is magic. There's some magic
Wow.
in this. Yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
for
So
sure.
you could enhance a transit, like if you had Jupiter coming over your Mars or something like that, and you were going to run a marathon and you wanted to like hyper function in the marathon, you could give yourself a Mars gong bath.
Yeah, yep. You could give yourself a Mars gong bath. And I mean, I would actually also recommend we call it the Earth Day Fifth. It's like a combination of the Earth Day and the Om. And it's like the thing that puts you in your body in the moment. It's a strengthening combination. And so it's like if you want to be hyper focused and ready for whatever's in front of you, that's the combination that's beautiful. So you could add some Mars into that, right? To remind, okay, we want physical vitality, we want speed, we want all this stuff, right? So you
Oh,
could add it, but the you have to, it's like a little bit deeper than just the planet, right? It's like what do you want out of it? And
interesting.
so that's sort of how you're always approaching the frequencies.
Interesting. What if you want to do like this most insane ohm that you've ever done? Then use the do you use like 10 of the ohm fork?
Well, I have chimes. That's what's behind me is the planetary chimes, where you
Oh,
can just that's what you use for like in the field or also sound baths and stuff. You use the chimes. And
I
so
always
I will
wondered what
like,
was behind you.
yeah, these are Koshi chimes. I don't know if you can hear anything. Zoom is bad for sound. Can you hear those?
No, not really. Yeah.
No. And so that's why I didn't offer to play anything for you because Zoom doesn't pick up the sound at all. It's too high frequency.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you can use the chimes and you can do like a whole sound bath in the chimes. I've got an ocean drum that it's a big drum that has beads in it, and you can stimulate the sound of the ocean. So it helps break up energy and helps movement, right? So if you're trying to get somebody in flow, I like starting with it. So that I mean, there's a creative side to the sound healing that's really beautiful too.
So you do basically sound healing and frequency healing. Like sometimes you're using
Yes.
frequency, sometimes
It's like
it's sound.
it's like, well, it's almost all frequency, but there's vibrational and there's sound,
Okay.
right? So I tend to call it more vibrational healing
Oh,
because a lot of the stuff is with the forks and it's the vibration and it's on the points, right?
interesting. So do you find that people who have like a Neptunian chart, if they have like Neptune conjunct the sun or Neptune conjunct the moon, are going to be more susceptible to frequency healing than like a super earthy chart like that has like 50 planets in Capricorn or something?
You know, it's really interesting. The ascendant fixity is big, I'm noticing. So what I tend to do is I wait for people's stomach to gurgle because it means that the parasympathetic nervous system is engaged and we're ready to go. And really fixed people, that takes a very long time to get their parasympathetic to engage.
Wow.
And more mutable, and especially immutable ascendant, they tend to get ready right away.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, I would definitely think there are certain charts that are more, because some people you have to like, you know, I don't know, punch them to like get them to notice something, and then some people you can just vibe them and they just start like freaking out. Like so like would you use this with like people who have like autism or hypersensory things like that?
could, yeah, for sure. I mean, the nice thing is that especially for people on the autism spectrum who have touch sensitivity, because you can work in the field, it has lots of benefits as well,
Hmm.
you know? And I know that I did work out of a clinic for a little while, and one of the other practitioners had a child with autism in session, and she was worried because he was really sound sensitive, especially to high pitch. And she said he didn't even flinch. He actually became more calm when he could hear because they had to keep baseboard heating and you could hear everything from the sound room.
Wow.
And she said he actually got calmer with the sounds and the high frequency didn't disturb him. So there's something about it for people on the spectrum that can be pretty helpful.
Interesting, fascinating. No, do acupuncturists do this or do they do
We get a
any?
lot of acupuncturists who train in this for sure.
Oh, really? And so do they mainly use it for people who are like afraid of needles and things like that?
I don't know. I think it's different. I don't know that there's one answer to that question. I think that a lot of them will get into it for that reason, but it's such a robust training. Like there's 13 levels, I think of. Yeah.
Wow.
If you do the entire program, there's 13 levels. It takes you at least 2 years and
Hmm.
it's really involved. So it just depends on what somebody wants to do with it.
Yeah. How many levels do you have?
I have all of them.
Really? You
Yeah.
have 13
So
levels?
when I started, you had to get all the levels to be called a practitioner. They've changed it now so that kind of like Kepler has done with the smaller certificates. They've changed it so that you can just do the first few levels or depending on what you want to do. But because I'm training to be a teacher for them, you have to have all the levels. So
Fascinating. Fascinating. So, now have you written or taught about this before?
this is the first time that yeah, that I've taught publicly about it. I'm developing an astrology for sound healers course for them. That's kind of my final project to finally get everything done. And so I'm really looking forward to that's actually why I wanted to work with you in dermatomes because I want to add that into because I think there's a lot of richness in putting forks on that dermatome area
Interesting.
and releasing stuff and opening stuff that's stuck and right you
Yeah.
if you were talking about Saturn, so for me it's Taurus, and so to put Taurus and something calming down that dermatome would be really
Let
helpful.
me let me get a picture of the dermatomes for people in the audience here. Um, I finally made a little worksheet that says medical astrology, put your natal chart and the dermatomes and like so here I'll just draw what you're talking about so people can see it. I have to find a Saturn crayon here. I'll put black in the Taurus dermatomes. So this if you have Saturn and Taurus, it would make dark chi right here. And so what you're saying is you could put those tuning forks on this Saturn and Taurus dermatome, and then you could like move energy through the dermatome like that.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite spots is one of the dew spots, which is center right underneath the occipital bone. And there's actually two more points on either side. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head. But putting forks on those points underneath my occipital is huge, and huge for not just that dermatome, but just all over health.
Interesting.
It feels great. I didn't realize it was part of that dermatome.
Oh yeah. Well, it's interesting because we call this the electromagnetic vibrational imprint when you draw the chart in the dermatomes, and then it's like so interesting that you do basically vibrational healing. So you could use this vibrational imprint to then go in and like do all kinds of you could make all kinds of prescriptions per the dermatome. So that's it's cool that you said that because I was actually thinking about that when you were talking earlier. I was like, oh man, if we could only get this on the dermatomes.
Yeah, no, I absolutely want to do some work with that for sure.
That's awesome.
Yep, it's exciting stuff.
Okay.
And I
So
wanted to say before we moved on, you were talking about vibration in the body and stuff. There's quite a bit of research coming out because people are like, how does acupuncture work? How does all this work? And there's all this research being done on the fascia, and the fascia being a liquid web underneath that is actually another nervous system that's transporting messages. And so they're building some scientific evidence in how we can send messages. Why are there messages that just randomly go, down a meridian or down a dermatome? So they're thinking it's all fascia related.
yeah, in the astrokinesiology book that we wrote, Astrosomatica, we have a whole chapter on fascia because we were studying the fascia years ago, and we actually believe that the chart burns into your fascia. Like, why is your Saturn
Wow,
in
yeah.
Taurus tight there? It's like your fascia is wired to be tight there, and the consciousness like lives in the fascia. Like, you can lift your arm in the gross motor way, or you can lift it like with your fascia. You can be like you can think of lifting your arm, and it like the consciousness travels through the fascia and then lifts the arm like so I think you're right there it is like the subtle nervous system travels through that fascia and yeah a meridian that's why you can hit a meridian here and it goes down in the lung it's like it's going through that fascia system which is like little like sticky tape it's almost like this like gooey sticky um
It almost looks like dew on a leaf when you're really close up to it, right? Like it's like that dewy wet and almost like sparkly. It's beautiful.
Yes, it's really amazing. Yeah, so I think astrologers really have a leg up on how the fascia is wired, what we can do to, release the fascia. It's all these frequency and vibrational things that really get at that fascia nervous system, whereas, it's like, I don't know. So there's something really important about what you're doing, and it really does. Because like if you change a person's consciousness, then they loosen up just like from the soul outward. It's not necessarily like the muscle, but it's like the consciousness releases, and that sounds like what you're kind of doing. Well, the mid tuning fork might hit the consciousness, whereas the big tuning fork might hit the actual bones or whatever. Um,
Well, and it depends where you put them too. You don't need to use a giant tuning fork to get into the skull, right?
Oh, is it?
You can just use a mid one because bone transports vibration so well that actually anytime you hit bone, you don't need a really strong vibration because it transports up the bone. So it does quite a bit of work for you.
That's nice. So if you were going to do it on the ear, would you use a little tuning fork or a big one?
I probably wouldn't use a giant one. I'd probably use like put a gem tip on either a high or a mid. You know, whether you put these on the body or not, everybody gives you something different. They're generally used in the fields, but you could stick this on an ear with a gem tip for sure if you wanted the high frequency.
Interesting.
Yeah. And if you wanted to do two forks, so what I would likely do is I would put the gem tip on the ohm because that would be the bottom. And then what you can do is you can strike the high one and just circle it around the top. And you're still creating the frequency, but you don't need the space of putting two forks on a place. And then, yeah, so you can do it that way. You have to be conscious that you're creating a different interval, but you can still do it that way.
Fascinating. Okay, well, I have one more question, but I want to know from you, since we only have 6 minutes, is there anything you want the viewers to know about AcuTonics or astrology and AcuTonics or anything that you were had brought to the table?
Well, the the thing that I love about it and the thing that has kept me going is that I've really found nothing like in a whole modality that so directly can remediate, right? Like it in a literal sense because it is based on planets, right?
Yeah.
And so the power of being able to use it and for the client to also be on the same page because you're telling them the planets and why, or you can if they're interested, right?
Hmm.
So it actually creates a conscious discussion about their astrological chart and about how to help it. And it helps with being people being self-reflective and getting more in tune with how their body's responding. And I mean, I just think the power in this modality is wild. The potential's wild.
Hmm.
That's all
Interesting.
I had to say.
Well, and it can be used like you can go to the doctor for an issue and then go to see AcuTonics for the same issue, and it's like it's not like a contraindication to going to the doctor. You could take a pill for your thyroid problem, but then also handle it with AcuTonics. Like I think it's like why not try it? I mean, it's really
I had a client who, and I actually only ever treated her as at a distance, and she had massive chronic illness issues. And it wasn't until we started doing the treatments that she finally found a treatment team to help with like medical team to help with the issues.
wow.
So there was something in that treatment process that aligned her with all the right people and primed. The thing that I like is that so if you start taking a new medication for something, let's say blood pressure, just for simple, right? Well, what you can do is you can use the acutonics and you're actually telling the body and the medicine what you want it to do
Hmm.
with the frequencies, right? So you can, first of all, there's a potential. I am not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be a doctor, but
Mhm.
there's a potential in less side effects, maybe, but definitely faster efficacy if it's the right prescription for you, right?
Hmm. Okay, here's a weird question. So if you had a broken arm, how could
Okay.
AcuTonics help with your broken arm?
Well, the the frequencies are so when you have an injury, any kind of injury, now all of the energy there is discordant, right? So as soon as you would use Saturn and you would use likely you could go either way. You could go with the planetary ruler of that person's Saturn specifically, or you could just use Om for making it right relationship. And you could use that over the broken bone to help the energy of the break heal itself.
Mm.
So there is lots of research on sound speeding up the healing process, no matter what it is, right?
Oh.
I know that John Bolio, who that's who I actually bought my first planetary forks from, he is a musician, knows a bit about astrology, but he has his own system called Biosonics. And he's really big on fifths, that anytime you create a fifth, that there's a specific kind of healing that happens in a fifth.
Mm.
And so and you can actually hear if you've got forks that are designed for sound, you can hear when something's out or off or broken, or you're storing emotional crap there, or you've got something in your field that you're holding on to. You can hear it change in your sound tools.
That is so cool. That is so cool. I mean, the sound of a broken bone. Now that's epic.
My my GP, who is like the most, sorry, my doctor, who is like the most normal, average, not woo-woo guy. I walked into his office last year and there's a tuning fork on his shelf. I'm like, what's that for? He's like, to check for broken bones.
Oh my God, that gave me chills. I love when this stuff intersects with, just general medicine because I do think that astrologers can interface so well with allopathic doctors and well, I appreciate you coming on so much today. I mean, I've been curious about what you do for years. Well, not year. I've known you for years, but I only knew you were into AcuTonics for maybe a year or something like that. So it's like ever since I heard about that, I've been really curious as about what is it, like how is it used? And of course, as a remedy astrologer, it's like I'm just so curious about like how this can be used. Um, okay, before we go, I have to know, have you read this book, Esoteric Anatomy?
I have that book, yes. I've
Okay,
never read
interesting.
it cover to cover, but I have it.
Okay, because you remind me so much of Casey Cardoso, the astrokinesiologist around here, who loves this book. And there's also a book called Polarity Therapy. But it seems like you're so in line with what Casey does. Casey's always sending vibrations down the vertebrae into the dermatomes and blah blah blah. So, well, thank
Nice.
you, Tracy. I hope that you remain friends with the Moira Press for a long time. I think this has been a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you for having me. This was great. I hope I didn't confuse you.
Are you kidding? You're gonna have to try a lot harder than that. Yeah, this feels
More, that was not a judgment on your intellect, more on my Neptune across from Mercury, totally screwing with me.
well, my Mercury in Scorpio is trine Jupiter, so I'm just like, oh, I learned something. I'm just stoked on that. I dropped some dopamine learning something. So,
Excellent.
and I think the students will like this a lot. So thank you so much, Tracy.
My
We'll
pleasure.
talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
All right. Bye.
Bye.